right in here, the flesh, the bone had snapped right through my flesh because I didn't have any meat on me. And I thought, what did I do? And I realized I'm on the outside. And where am I going? Where do you think you'd go? I'm not in the United States. I'm in another country. And I don't know a thing about that country. When they took me over there, I was heavily veiled. And they took me from that particular cart or train to the convent. I was heavily veiled. I couldn't see anything. And I don't know where I am. I don't know where to go. I don't know if I have any people. I don't know if I know anybody in the world. And I'm a pauper. I don't have any money. And I'm hungry. And my body's broken. And I'm hurt now. Where do you think you go? I tell you, it's something to think about. I just started to wave and get away from the convent. And I did. And I started moving away. And all the leaves were falling. And they made so much noise. And I was scared. And I kept on moving. And finally dark overtook me. Or rather, no twilight in that part of the country. It just drops off into darkness. And, you know, I saw this little building beside the road, and I thought I'll crawl in it. It was a doghouse or maybe a chicken coop or something, but it's dirty, and I crawled in there because I was shaking and scared. And I laid in there for a little while to get a hold of myself, and then I thought I'll have to travel. It's dark. It's safer for me. So I got out and traveled that night, and the next day I hid behind pieces of board and tin that was piled up against an old building. And all day long, imagine hiding in that hot place. And hungry as I was, with broken bones, do you realize what it was all about? No, you'll never know. But I do. And then, you know, when night came again, I have to go because I'm going to get away from the convent. I'm afraid to rap on somebody's door. Remember, I'm scared. I don't know. I might rap on a Roman Catholic door. They will immediately have notified the priest, and I'll be taken back to the convent. And I'd rather they kill me than take me back. So I didn't, but I went on and on and on. And then the next night, or next day, I hid out in an old straw stack. And then that afternoon, on the third day, I was scared then because this arm was swollen and tight and could swell. I was having to carry it in the other hand. And all my fingers began to turn blue, and I realized gangrene poisoning setting in. And you know, I'm nobody to do anything for you. And I realized I'm going to die just like a rat beside the road. That's a terrible feeling. And I thought, what'll I do? I'll just get out and go a little sooner. Maybe I'll have to rap on somebody's door. And that's what I did. I remember as I walked, I don't know how far, I saw this lamp. It was an old-fashioned lamp burning. Very poor house with no paint on it. And I knew those were poor people. So I walked up to the screen door and I rapped on it. And a tall man came to the door. He was rather old. And I said, please, may I have a drink of water? And you know, that old man didn't answer me when he walked back in the house and called his wife. And God bless her heart, she's like most old-fashioned mothers. She came to the door and she didn't say, who are you? And what do you want? Thank God. There are a lot of good people in this world. That dear little woman just pushed that door open and said, won't you come in and sit down? Do you know that's the most beautiful music I've ever heard in my life? I should say I'll come in and sit down. And she pulled out a chair. And I sat down on it, glad to sit down. And you know, the house was poor. There was no rugs on the floor of any type. A tablecloth, red checkered tablecloth on the table, a little old stove over there in the corner, and there was a fire in it. And that woman put some milk in a pan and heated and brought it over to me. And you know, I'm hungry. I don't have any manners. I forgot how to act. I forgot a lot of things in 22 years. And I grabbed that glass of milk off before she ever set it down, and I gobbled it down. I'm so hungry, I felt like I'm going to start mad. And I took it instantly, and the moment it touched my stomach, of course, I couldn't retain it. I lost it. I haven't had any whole milk in 22 years. You could understand why I couldn't take it. And she knew what to do. She went out in the kitchen, she heated some water, or rather over to the stove and heated some water. And bless her heart, she put sugar in that water and brought it over to me. And she sat down and gave it to me from a spoon. I took every bit of it. Oh, it was good. It was nourishing. And then the daddy walked over by me and he said, now tell us who you are and where'd you come from. I began to cry. I was scared then. I said, I run away from the convent and I'm not going back. And he said, what happened to you? And my hand was laying up on the table. And I said, well, I tried to get over the gate and I failed and I'm hurt. And you know, he said, we'll have to call a doctor. And bless your sweet life. Then I really became hysterical. I got up from the table. I was going to run back outside, and they wouldn't let me. He said, wait a minute, we're not going to hurt you. You're hurt. You have to have help. I said, I don't have any money, and I don't have any people. And I can't pay a doctor bill. Of course, I was just in a terrible mess, if you want to know it. And that man said to me, I'm going after a doctor. He said, and he's not a Roman Catholic. Neither am I. That dear man didn't have a car, but he took a horse and buggy. He drove 9 miles to get a doctor. The doctor came out in his car, and when he got out to the place, he got there ahead of the man. And when the doctor walked in and walked around me, he just kept walking around me, and he was swearing. Maybe he didn't realize it was a terrible effect on me. When he stopped and looked at me, course, he was mad. He was mad. Why was he mad? He was mad because he was looking at something that was supposed to be a human being. And I didn't even look like a human being. I was in such a horrible condition. But finally he calmed down. He came over to me and he said, I'll have to take you to the hospital tonight. Oh, I became hysterical. I said, I don't want to go. Please don't make me go. And then he sat down carefully and took my hand. And he began to say, I'm not going to hurt you. You have to have help. And I want to help you. That doctor took me into the hospital that night, and that's where I learned how much I weigh. He weighed me, and I weighed exactly 89 pounds. I weigh 178 right now. And then, you know, they took me into surgery, and of course they tried to get the swelling and the inflammation out of my hand and arm, that they might do something for me. It took about 12, 13 days. And then, of course, they had it, but this time it started to hit, and they had all to break over it again and put in a cast. I did a lot of suffering. Well, you know, one day that a way was made for me to be released from the hospital. Who did they release me to? I begged to go out to those old people to stay with them, and they let me go because they'd been good to me, and I trusted them. And the doctor wanted to take me out to his home. I was in that hospital 3.5 months. And they took me out there, and I stayed for a period of time. And then one day, this same doctor, he wrote a letter, and you know what he said in that letter? He sent a check. He told the people to go and buy me a suitcase and get me some clothing. He was coming for me on a certain day. He had told me, I'm going to find your people for me. You know, that doctor's a stranger to me. But oh, I thank God that he has men and women across this world, and those men and women are not so selfish that they won't use some of the money that God has allowed them to have to help that one that's less fortunate than today. He spent a lot of money on me. I was in that hospital 3.5 months, and I mean there was a lot of money spent on me, but he paid the bills. How appreciated. And you know that dear doctor, they took me, bought my clothing from me, got my suitcase, and everything was ready. And the day came when he came, and you know that doctor took me to the train. And he put me on a train in care of somebody, of course. He found my people for me. I was on buses and trains and boats for a long time, and one day, after he had gotten my visa to get back into the United States, and I was always in charge of somebody because they wouldn't trust me to travel alone because of having lived under the ground so long. And one day, they called the name of the town where I was, or where my mother and daddy lived. And you know, I knew where mother and daddy lived, and I got off of that train and run down to their home, 5 blocks from that depot, just a very small town. And when I rang the bell, my daddy come to the door, and you know, I looked at his face, I didn't know him. And because I didn't know him, I said, do you know where my father lives? And he said, who are you, and what's your name? And I said, my name, and I didn't give him my church name, I gave him my family name. And that man looked at me, and of course it was his name, and he said, Hooky, is this you? My father didn't know me, of course, it was my dad. That dear old man opened the door then and invited me in, and I said, Dad, is mother alive? Because I didn't know about her. And he took me back in to see her, and there she was. 7.5 years she'd laid there an invalid, a horrible, horrible invalid. And of course she didn't know me, and I didn't know her. Well, you know, that very night I took Margaret to 6, and they put me back in another hospital for another 3 months. But my father paid all of those bills. He reimbursed the doctor and paid the doctor in another country and paid the old people. He reimbursed them all. All of that was wonderful. Then, you know, one day, after my body was strong enough, since I'm here in the United States, it took a long time, several years. I'm a nurse, and I took the examination to nurse. And you know what God did? He let a woman come into that particular hospital. It was a Roman Catholic hospital. This woman was a Church of God minister. She came in, and I thought, how strange. Just across the Mississippi River is 2 magnificent Protestant hospitals, and she lives in one of those cities. Right there, 3 cities joined together. And why in the world did she come over here to this Roman Catholic hospital? Why, I believe God had his hand on it all the time. You know that woman who came in, and the doctor said, I want you to dispatch her case, and I went into that room to prepare that woman for the operating table. And I heard her pray. And I want you to know I became that woman's private nurse, her special nurse. After she left the hospital, she went home, and I became her special nurse in the home. And that woman asked me if I wouldn't go to church with her. And you know, I lived in her home long enough to hear her pray. I lived in that home long enough to read the Bible to her because I am her nurse and I did what she told me to. I'd never read a Bible before in all of my life, and she'd have to find the scriptures, and then I'd read them to her. And you know, as I read the Word of God, God began to get a hold of me. And finally she said, won't you go to church with me? And you know, I went to church with that woman. And I sat back there and heard a gospel for the first time in my life. And you know, I'll tell you, I went through 4 nights. And it was really beautiful. I've never heard anything like this. And all the time she was telling me about the plan of salvation, telling me about God, and that I needed God, and I needed to be saved. And of course, I was believing her. Do you know what I'd do every night? I'd go home from church with that.